Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Wormsley and Nathan Wrigley.
Hello there and welcome once again to the WP Builds podcast. You've reached episode number 275, entitled Creating a Brand. It was published on Thursday, the 21st of April, 2022. My name's Nathan Wrigley, and I'll be joined in just a few short moments by my good friend David Wormsley, so that we can chat about this particular subject. It's one of our WordPress Business Bootcamp series. We're going through 6 series in total, and this is series 2, episode number 4, but more about that in a few moments. Because, first of all, a few bits of housekeeping. If you like what we're doing at WP Builds, head over to our website, wpbuilds.com. There's a menu at the top, and I'm going to encourage you to look at the subscribe link. If you go there, you'll be able to find all the places that we produce content. So, for example, our YouTube channel, it's got our Twitter feed, and so on. By the way, that's at WP Builds if you fancy following us. But it's also got some newsletters that you can sign up to if you'd like to receive updates when we produce content. That content comes out twice a week. It's the This Week in WordPress show, which we do live every Monday, 2 p.m. UK time. Come along, join in with some comments. And also the podcast episode comes out on a Thursday. You're listening to that right now. Another couple of things to mention is our deals page. I talk about this each and every week, and I say that it's a bit like Black Friday, but every single day of the week. Loads of coupon codes for WordPress-specific products. There's things like themes, plugins, blocks, hosting, all of that kind of stuff. wpbuilds.com/deals. You can use the search to filter down to what it is that you'd like. And also, there's been a few comments on Twitter and various places this week about our Mastodon install. It's a little bit like Twitter. It's called WP Builds Social. wpbuilds.social is the URL. Go there and join up. There's only about 70 of us. It's fairly quiet, but you never know. If I keep plugging it, we might get some more traction over there. Like I say, it's a bit like Twitter. It's a federated piece of open source software called Mastodon, and feel free to come in and join in the conversation over there. Tell us all of your WordPress stories. Okay, that's all I've got in terms of housekeeping. So we're on to today's episode. Today's episode is number 4 in series 2, and it's called Creating a Brand. And on the podcast today, we chunk this into various different sections. The problem really is that we are the first on the scene for our new client, Miss A, who is a lawyer, and we've got to figure out what it is that we need to do in terms of branding. So it's chunked up into various different sections like researching the target audience, picking a focus and a personality, choosing a business name, writing a slogan, choosing the look and feel of the brand. That might be fonts and so on. What about a logo? Do we need that? And then trying to apply all of that across the brand and the business. It's a big subject. Don't forget that there are some accompanying show notes over at wpbuilds.com, and if you search for this episode, which is episode number 275, you'll be able to find them. All the links and everything are contained over there. A strange thing occurred during the recording of this episode, something that I can't track down and I can't figure out why it happened, but on my audio there was some sort of clicking noise. I really have no idea how it crept in. It's completely listenable. It's almost as if I was tapping on the desk or fiddling with a pen or something like that. Like I say, it's totally listenable, and I hope it won't spoil your enjoyment.
Welcome to another in the Business Bootcamp series, where we relearn everything we know about building WordPress sites and running a web design business from start to finish. We're on season 2, where we're looking at the design process. And today we are discussing how to create a brand. So Nathan and I are taking contrasting approaches, getting our new business running and our first client site built. She's a new lawyer with no previous site. She's called Miss A. Nathan, shall we just recap?
Yeah, if you've not been paying attention to this series, then probably it might be good to go right back to the beginning, series 1, episode 1. But essentially, David and I are in contrasting camps. I'm going with the traditional, what might be described as waterfall business model, in which I do everything in a traditional fixed way. So that is, I knock up a proposal after talking to the client and then issue a contract and basically get everything set up in advance. And then once they've signed the contract, I disappear for a bit, do the work, come back, and hopefully complete it by the deadline and get paid.
And I'm going agile, where there's a fixed fee for sprints of work, and our proposal is nothing formal. We're really planning to get out a minimal viable website and over time iteratively improve it. So take in the kind of data that we might get feedback and improve it. So there's no end deadline to this. So it's a much kind of looser build.
Yeah. And today we are talking, well, you can introduce it.
Yeah, creating a brand, which is something which we are not really qualified to talk about. But as we've decided that our lawyer had no branding, we really are going to be the first folks who may be defining what this business is going to have to live with for some time. So,
yeah, the problem with this is it really is an industry all its own, isn't it? You know, creating logos and all of the different bits that we're going around. But as always, David's throwing together some pretty comprehensive show notes. And so we're going to block this up into, I think it was 7, wasn't it? Yeah, 7 distinct topics. And I'll just list them out at the beginning, if that's all right. Can I do that, David?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Please.
So, and then we'll take them one at a time. So the first one is researching the target audience and the competitors. That's point 1. Number 2, picking your focus and personality. Point 3, choosing a name for your business. Number 4, writing out a slogan. Number 5, choose the look of your brand. So that could be colors or fonts. Number 6, design your brand logo. And number 7, apply your branding across your business. And whilst David's put together these show notes, you have been out scouring the internet for thoughts and come up with Shopify by the looks of it for this.
Yeah, that's it. That's how they say to build a brand, and there's quite a good article by them actually on that. So we're using that as our basis, aren't we? So our research, there's a lot of overlap with the stuff that we're talking about. So our next episode will be talking about UX, where in a way we'll be coming at some of the same stuff. And previously we talked about the first point about the target audience and competitors with keyword research and looking at what other websites do. So there's a lot of overlap, but that's where people who do branding would start as well, wouldn't they? With the research, trying to find out, but we should define, shouldn't we, actually, before we move any further, what branding is. And I found a quote for that from the American Marketing Association. So a brand is a name, term, design, symbol, or any other feature that identifies one seller's goods or services as distinct from those of other sellers.
Yeah.
So with branding, we are trying to distinguish ourselves from our competitors.
Yeah.
So that's probably something to keep in mind while we're talking about this.
Okay.
Research. So
researching the target audience and competitors. I think all of us lot are probably really able to do certain types of research really straightforwardly, like, keyword research and all of that is really straightforward. And competitor analysis for me usually involved me just browsing the web, usually inspired by Google, putting in searches for something similar. So in our case, if it was Madame A as the lawyer, I'd be typing in lawyers, and in my case in Yorkshire, perhaps something like that, and taking it from there. But the target audience, I never really got a handle on that. I always kind of assumed that my gut instinct was what needed to be done, or that the business owner themselves knew what that target audience did. So I'm coming up dry on this one. I'm not really very able to give any insights here.
No, and I don't think a Shopify article comes up with anything more than that. Google search and asking questions of the business itself. And if you're doing the branding, you're going to need to know from the client, aren't you, who they're aiming at before we can really get further. And I think that's all it's starting from that point. There is another point, and when we go on to UX later, which would be, that target audience, you might come at it from a different angle, and that might be included in this, where you're really trying to find out things that users think about this company as well. They might give you some insights to this and how they're different from competitors as well. So, but I don't think there isn't a format, is there? But have you had the situation where you've had to do what you would class as the branding for business before?
Yes, I have had to do that, but in my case, it's always been very straightforward. That is to say, their requirements were not very complicated.
Yeah.
And I usually handed it off to one of 2 or 3 different graphic designers because I felt that their insights would be better. In some cases, there would be a conversation between the graphic designer and the client. But in many cases, I was the conduit of that information. So I would be the sort of go-between. My graphic designer would ask me a series of things they wished to know, and then I would relay those questions and then respond. But it always worked better when the client chatted directly to the graphic designer because I felt that there were probably things in that conversation that would be more useful. So yes, I have, but in my cases, not very frequently did I saddle myself with the job. And when I did, it was because I knew that the budget was very modest, and also I knew that their expectations were not, focus groups of people. It was just, can you just give us a logo? Whatever works, we'll go with that. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, not so much. Well, a lot of the earlier work was done with my colleague who would have done the branding side of it anyway. So, but recently I've had to do effectively that. I've had to start with the logo because they needed this for their premises first. So, and I've realized that how little I know about this because it's probably an oversight on my part because I did the logos, we picked the colors and everything. And one of the last things before the site went live that I got from them was their proper address. So I could Google it and look at the type of neighborhood. And it made me realize that what I've been used to is thinking totally online and what's going to work there in terms of branding, where suddenly I realized that this signage is going to go up on a street level, and that if so in the example where we were discussing last time about a lawyer, whether we would go with a wacky kind of idea for them to distinguish it from the other more staid and kind of expected lawyer thing, you would need to think about that if you suddenly realize that the lawyer's got an office that's going to be on a really upmarket high street or something. This kind of branding that might have to go on their signs might change their office decor, their vehicles, everything, could have a real impact. So it's made me really appreciative. Certainly, I think it was an oversight on my part to start helping somebody with a logo and picking colors for that without really understanding the offline context for it.
Yeah, and there will be, for a lawyer, an enormous offline context. So probably not on the back of vehicles and things like that, but certainly, the usual arrangement of leaflets and letterheads. And recently, actually, funnily enough, I was parked in a car park. I was dropping my daughter off or something, and I noticed that there was a local lawyer's, and they had a huge brass plaque outside their offices. It was about, 4 feet wide, and it had their logo on it, and it was fairly modest, that is to say, simple, so they could etch it into the copper. But if you did go for something really complicated, that would have been really difficult to pull off. Presumably, lawyers maybe are one of the few businesses that would actually go for the copper logo outside their office. But nevertheless, all of that needs to be thought of. So putting it as number 1 in the list here feels really important. But it's got to be borne in mind, what orientation is it? Is it going to be letterbox? Are you going for square or wide? Or where are they going to be posting things on social media? And all of these things come into effect. And like you say, even though the website can modify that logo on a whim, once the business cards are done and the leaflets are created and the paper is being letterheaded, that you're fixed there for probably years and years to come.
Yeah. And I think, because I'm always seeing things from the online perspective, what's going to get traffic, what's going to get conversions, and thinking about that and setting them against their competitors, which of course is what you're supposed to do with branding, distinguish yourself. But suddenly, you would realize you would need to have a good conversation about the plans, really, where that client thinks they're going to get the majority of their leads. So would you if you decided that it needed to be a bit more wacky online, might you go that direction because you're going to get most of your leads online, or is it going to be the offline? So I think that research, those kind of early questions are really important. I've neglected it for sure.
The interesting thing is I've done quite a few lawyers' websites, and in no cases did I need to address the problem of the logo at all. it was simply done already, and the expectation was that I would use that, and because they'd already, they'd got a history of publishing these leaflets and so on. But in terms of target audience, I think for me it really would be a Google search. Nothing much more complicated than that. And obviously one would hope that Madame A in this case has some insight into who they are. And I think her business is pretty straightforward, really, as we're going to explore in this episode. We feel like we've landed on our feet here because the constraints are pretty tight around lawyering, I think. So there's we're not going to be doing anything wacky. So
no,
I think if you get a lawyer client, this part of the puzzle is pretty easy to put into the jigsaw.
Yeah, I think so. Should we move on to point 2, which is pick your focus and personality? So, there's, as the article we're referencing mentions, there are quite a lot of tools out there, so you can try and get and find that personality, types of questions that you can kind of ask. Have you done any of this kind of stuff?
Okay, before? Yeah, and yes, basically, and it was always, I felt awkward, and it was like a waste of time. That forgive me. It really did feel like I was clutching at straws here. So typically what I would do in my onboarding form, which was trying to get some sort of information once they'd decided that I was for them, they wanted me to do their website. I can't remember the wording on the question, but it was something on the lines of, how do you want your brand to feel? And I think there were like 4 or 5 choices, calm and comfortable, something like wacky and new, reliable and trustworthy, those kind of choices. But the thing is, it didn't really get me anywhere. All I knew is that they'd associated themselves with a few words, but that didn't really then tell me an awful lot. That is to say, I probably could have figured it out, but in the conversation that I was having with them. So yes, I've tried to do that, but I didn't go into the whole personifying it. I didn't try to link it to an actual human being, this user persona. I didn't really get into that level, but I understand people do, and it seems to bear fruit. What about you?
Yeah, well, I tried it. I mean, I mentioned before that I love this question that was, if your brand was a famous personality, who would they be, as a way of trying to get to it. And then you could, from that, say, okay, well, I see that person as, Tom Hanks is dependable, he's kind of straight-laced, is these things, is that you? But there is on the Shopify article, there is something, if your brand was a person, choose 3 to 5 words that would describe him or her. And it lists these 3 columns, which must be a total of about 75 words must be there or something, And I just think, like you, I maybe started with these ideas because it sounded kind of clever, but suddenly I felt like I was a primary school teacher asking somebody to do this. So I'd rather have the conversation and have it in the back of my mind that I need a few of these descriptive words, and then I would probably present it to them from our chat. This is what I think these words would probably signify your brand. Is that kind of right? That seemed an easier way to do it.
Yeah.
So I try and bring it in now as much as I can, but in a less corny way, I guess.
Yeah, so the other thing to say here is I kind of grew to believe that this question was a bit superfluous because it wasn't something I could learn, that I couldn't learn elsewhere. But also, I felt like the question's just wrong in that which of your clients are really armed to answer that thoughtfully? I imagine there's probably different questions that I could have asked. So, for example, I think there might be a better question, and that would be, look, here's 20 different websites that I've collated. Pick your favorite 3, and then we'll have a discussion about what you like about them and whether it would fit around your branding. Something like that, I think, would deliver me more results than, which famous actor do you want your website to be like? Because honestly, if you ask me that question, in fact, David, tell me, go on, which famous actor would you like your business to be like?
Oh gosh, yes,
exactly, right? Exactly. Yeah. It makes you feel like queasy and weird. It's like, that's what? I'm just going to say, I don't know, Clint Eastwood. But there we go. So I think the question probably needs reframing to make me feel happier about it. But also I suspect that
lawyer.
For our lawyer, it's going to be a bit like, what? It's a weird question. Why do you want to know that?
There is actually probably more valuable in this section from the Amazon thing is what's your position statement, which is they give us kind of format for that. We offer, blank product service for blank target audience to blank value proposition, and to fill those kind of things in. I think they're probably quite important to, even if you don't ask them to fill that in, to get that and format it that way, because I noticed that as well when it came to something which we'll cover later with a recent client, is that I asked them a similar question that gave me which approach that they might take to a certain business, because there were kind of two ways at it. One, you could look at it as a kind of medical, you help people, or you could look at it as a service that is offered to improve people's lives. And they were kind of opposite things, and they seemed to switch on me when we were talking about other branding things. So having this kind of positioning statement is really handy.
Yeah, and also I can get that. Maybe that's just the way that you and I have been brought up or something. But that the whole decide what person your personality of your website is much more difficult for me to get into than the way that you just described it in terms of Amazon.
Yeah.
What? Can you repeat that sentence? What was it again?
No, I can't.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember at all.
Rewind the podcast about a minute and a half. That sentence. It just felt better. It felt more natural for me because all I was doing was filling in the blanks. And as a business owner, I can probably identify what those blanks were pretty quickly. And I'd probably come up with 3 or 4 words that would fit and probably have to settle on the best one. So that just works better for me.
I think a lot of these kind of there are a lot of these exercises to try and get this kind of personality or focus and stuff, and I do think that perhaps they've just been created by as kind of branding people.
Yes.
As fun time out for the clients that we've got.
Yeah.
Do you want to play this game with us? Or
That's right. That's right. Yeah, you're paying us so much money. Let's play some games. Anyway, that's our picking focus and personality. UI people and web designers are probably going to shoot us down for that comment, but that's just the way we feel. So are we on to 3 now?
1 to 3. Choose your business name. Yikes.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel that with our lawyer client, we've hit a home run, because that's going to be pretty straightforward. I would imagine. What I mean by that is, I did a quick search a couple of days ago just to see where this would land, and all the lawyers in my area are branded by their own name, and if not their own name, their surname, and then another surname of the partners who probably set the business up. So I don't know, Smith and Johnson, something like that. Yeah. So it's pretty straightforward, and we're in that kind of industry where people want dependable, want reliable. So it's going to be pretty straightforward to get that name, I would imagine. However, if we're selling, I don't know, a new range of cool T-shirts or trainers, sneakers, it could be completely different. So you might want to go for something wild. And I think of all the things we're talking about today, you wrote in the show notes, number 3, this is huge. I think this is the biggest one. You get this wrong, you're really going to be in trouble.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, the article we're looking at actually contains a link to a business name generator, which is quite good fun. You stick your keyword in
nice.
there, and it generates. Some of them are really bizarre. They'll just make you laugh, so it's a bit fun. But so I mean, it also talks about other approaches for coming up with names, like making up a word like Pepsi, or reframing an unrelated word like Apple for computers, and various other suggestions. There is one other thing, though, that I often think about with with online and how successful personal branding can be if you're doing content making, whether that is effective now to be thinking. That's your choice. Do you come up with this business name, or do you personally brand it?
Ooh, yeah, it's difficult, that, isn't it? So are you saying, have I understood your question correctly? Are you saying do you go for a typical ordinary name that's easy to identify what you do, or do you co-opt a word out of your vocabulary and adopt that and hope, or even make up a word and hope that over time people will associate you with that thing? So a good example, perfect one, Apple is now computers, Amazon is now online delivery of stuff, and so on. but you know that the word Amazon is a river, the word apple is a fruit, but everybody gets it now.
Yeah.
Is that what you meant?
Well, that's another concern. I was just thinking about, whether if you were talking to them online and you thought, let's say, this is unlikely, but our client, we'll call her Mary Appleton, shall we? We call her Miss A. We'll give her Appleton. Let's say she might just want to go for maryappleton.co.uk or whatever, and a law site beyond that, because she'll go around doing a YouTube channel talking about law and all of that, and she'll be known for her name, and they know she's the law person.
Yeah.
And I think that's an approach. I think it's unlikely in this case, but in some ways, as you said with the lawyer, they tend to be the same format. It would be Appleton and Bingley, and although she might not have a Bingley, she might have a dog called that, so she can.
Yeah, I guess the strategy of a lawyer over time is to grow a business and take on other partners, and those partners at some point will have the expectation that their names will be thrown into the mix as well.
Yes.
So that might be important, and it feels like such a sure and steady thing to say Appleton Law. Because at some point in the future, that can be expanded to Appleton and Smith or whatever law. But if you're reaching out to do something new, like a good example is, I guess, Sticker Mule is quite a good one. It says what it is. They do stickers, but also they've thrown the mule in because of the logo, and it's kind of a bit wacky and a bit funky, and it's also kind of cartoonish, which is exactly what they want. I think you've got to really think carefully about this. But for the lawyer, I think it's a slam dunk. You just go with your name, right?
But I'm also quite keen, for the keyword end of it, is that they get a keyword in that might be useful. Particularly, we've got a new site, and there is some advantage to having one of your keywords in your domain name. So, could she be Appleton Lawyers? Or could she be, or her area name Lawyers, even though her business name. So a domain name could be an entirely separate name, couldn't it?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
So there's a lot there.
Yeah, I mean, there'll be a link in the show notes about how to build a brand name from that Shopify website. But really important to get this right. The whole tenor of it can matter. Get it wrong and you just sound foolish. Get it right and it sounds cool and funky. Mind you, I suppose some things that are cool and funky this year go out of favour next year. But anyway, there we go. I do like the idea, though, of co-opting a word and trying to see if you can make that work. I think if you're really going to hit the heights, it is kind of cool to just use a word that everybody else already is using and just make it your own. I like that.
Yeah. Lawyer pants.
That's the least acceptable variation on what I was thinking. That's genius. Oh, okay, that's what we've settled on. Lawyerpants.com. Okay, next. Slogan. Very, very much related to writing a business name, I guess.
This is one that I've, because of... It's interesting. My recent client came up with a slogan after talking to some of her colleagues on her business, and she did this thing which I often show clients to, and I showed her to, where StoryBrand, the book there, the author Donald Miller has these little 5-minute videos, and they're really useful to show someone about getting clarity for your website, and he ridicules this thing done by branding experts where it says, there's a picture, a hero section showing mountains or something, and it says your journey starts here, and then it's got these 3 words under it: artisan, innovative, solutions. And he just says, anyone landing on this has no idea what this is about, and they're gone. And I think that's the problem often, my association with slogans. I kind of dread it when I hear clients might come up with them because they love doing this kind of stuff.
Do you subscribe to so we have this company in the UK called Hammerite, and Hammerite make a sort of paint that you use on outdoors, so you use it on like wrought iron fences and things, and their slogan is it does what it says on the tin. Which is like really, it's brutal. It's kind of like just read the tin and then you'll know what it does. But it's become this slogan of theirs. It does what it says on the tin. Has become the phrase, certainly in the UK version of English. It's become the phrase of just do the obvious thing. You know, if you want it to work, do the obvious thing. So, you know, if you're selling shoes, say that you're selling shoes. Don't try to dress it up in flowery language. If you're selling cars, say that you're selling cars. Do the thing that it says on the tin. And I respond so much better to those slogans than the ones which are trying to be, as you said, the one here, artisan, innovative solutions. It doesn't tell me what it's... There's nothing about what's on the tin there. I just know that you've got pretensions to be an artist, to do new things and to provide solutions. But to what? So I really like the does what it says on the tin. And before we click record, that I mentioned we were talking about supermarkets who seem to drill down on this. And one of them in the UK is called Sainsbury's, and I think they've got the best slogan for a supermarket, and it's where good food costs less. Because literally they are the two things that I care about when I go into a supermarket. There might be other ancillary things, you know, like the environmental impact of the packaging and all that, but primarily I want it to be as affordable as possible, and I want to think that it's good. The quality of the food is good. So they've hit the nail on the head with it does what it says on the tin, and I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the article, the Shopify one, actually gives you some ideas. You can state your claim, which I think is what we like. So Death Wish coffee is the world's strongest coffee, so it's clear what you're getting. Or make a metaphor, Red Bull gives you wings. Adopt your customer's attitude with Nike, just do it, that kind of thing. And so there are different ways, and I think some suit the web better, don't they? Obviously, there's kind of state your claim or describe it literally, which is also something we like, you know. So
I also think that they've got to be fairly pithy, that is to say, fairly short, you know. But you had a brilliant example of one that was long, but obviously over decades has stood the test of time. I don't know if they're still using it. You had a Rolls-Royce one. Have you still got that written down?
Yeah, it's a really famous one by David Ogilvy, who's kind of, you know, the real leader on copy for advertising. And I can't remember it exactly, but I think it is the only sound you will hear at 60 miles an hour in a Rolls-Royce is the sound of the clock ticking or something. It's something along those lines. And it's really held up as this wonderful piece of advertising with words, you know, because it puts you in the scene and tells you about the quality of the product. But you pointed out, how well would that work today?
Yeah, I feel that's like a good strap line. So it'd be the kind of, it would work really well as the kind of tail end of a commercial. But nowadays I feel that everybody would just condense that to silent driving or something like that, you know, just something short and pithy. And
It's
maybe
solid.
that's our attention span, or, you know, we're used to collapsing things into a mobile interface where you can get 2 or 3 words at most. But I don't see slogans of that length anymore. But boy, if that one, I love it. It's brilliant. But imagine trying to get that slogan, like if that was the Red Bull slogan, had one of equal length, they'd have to go round the tin can a couple of times to get it on.
Yeah. There was another famous one. I forget which chocolate it is. It might be Skittles, something like that. Something that's sugar-coated chocolate. And it says melts in your mouth rather than in your hands. And again, it's another one which is short, but it kind of puts you in the scene straight away.
Yeah.
It tells you what you're getting.
There's a lot of art to this, isn't there? And I feel that I would never be sure that I'd arrived at the best one. I think I'd always be thinking, oh, there's another one round the corner. We find it really hard to settle on this. But I guess for the lawyer, do they even need a slogan?
We always win.
We always win.
I honestly don't know. Yeah.
That would be perfect. Of course, it's unlikely to be true. But it feels like you're not really in the game of having slogans. It's not that kind of a product, is it? It's sure and steady, and it's not trying to sort of trick you into anything. I don't know. Maybe lawyers do have sort of slogans, but it's not. I don't think this would be the top of mind for me building Madame A's website. It wouldn't be like, okay, we must get a slogan.
We are so much of our culture, though, with the UK, where lawyers kind of have this gravitas, and, you know, it would be ungentlemanly to kind of behave in a certain way.
That's right.
Whereas I think in other parts of the world, lawyers will promote themselves in entirely different ways. So, yeah, a slogan might seem a little bit, beneath them, really, might it? You know,
that's a really good point. Depending on where you live in the world, it might be a far more kind of cutthroat what's the word? There may be more in terms of advertising than we have here, because the advertising around lawyers here is very sort of decades old, isn't it? It hasn't really changed that much. Okay, so that's the slogan. We know we need one potentially, but not going to be too important in the case of a lawyer in the UK. Number 5, choose the look of your brand, colours and fonts. Oh boy.
Well, you could talk about this for ages, but we better hold it because we're going to have an episode where we're talking about aesthetics and stuff like that. So we'll get into a bit more of that, I think, later. But I mean, there may be just some things that we won't cover there, which is something I've come up against is, picking the fonts. I've done work for people who they've done their offline branding is really advanced. They've got designers who do that and they use really expensive fonts, and then they're going to cost a bomb to use those fonts on the web. So these kind of issues that have come up for me before about picking the font that you can use online as well as offline.
Yes.
And also there's another thing which, again, because I don't have a background in print, I overlook. Often I'm attracted to wonderful colors that look great on the screen and print terribly.
Yes. Have you ever explored the buying a monitor which replicates the colors of the fonts in print?
Yeah, well, in the early days, I thought this was really important. I should learn this. And we were doing some print. I had this little card shop where we actually did some printing at home. So I did try and do that, calibrate the monitor to simulate it. I forget to do that, of course, these days. But also, you never really quite got it. Some really, it'd be very, I'm attracted to these very bright, vibrant colors which you can get from the screen, which then get very dull when they go to print.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I mean, that's the only thing on choosing our brands and fonts that we ought to talk about here, because we will cover a lot later. But that is something I don't think I have a system for.
I never had a system for this. It was basically what the client likes the look of. So it was a question of looking through a collection of fonts and keep, trying to keep it on the cheap. It was mostly the concern.
Well, that's the thing, is it? You pick a font and the client generally, most clients are going to go with it. They just don't, they may, but it's really going to be subconscious, know the difference between fonts. They're just not going to be able to articulate it in most cases.
No, I literally cannot think of a time where a client was very, very fussy about the font. The UI people out there and UX people are going to shoot us down for that, but it never was anything which caused great concern for the stuff I was building.
Yeah. It's interesting because I did this logo for somebody and I sent it off. It's not what I'm skilled on. We'll talk about this in a minute. But, they changed the font at the printers there. And I still haven't worked out whether it's just that my choice of fonts were bad for this kind of thing.
That's kind of upsetting, though. So what, you gave them it with the fonts included and they decided we don't like that font?
We've never had this conversation yet because my client said that, I think it's my fault because I changing the name of the thing that she wanted and the positioning and that. And I think what she showed me was actually only their first take to show positioning, and they maybe didn't intend to change the font. But anyway, presently it's changed. So it's interesting, but certainly I've become aware of the fact that, while we're doing the branding, we have to think of the offline, and I'm not very good on that stuff myself.
I had a curious thing where I had a client for years, and we actually use, I think it was Ubuntu. They went for that, which is kind of like a really, it's a very circular font. And they really enjoyed that. And then when I stopped working with them, because they changed some personnel over, I did notice within like a couple of days, they'd stripped that Ubuntu font out and they'd replaced it with, I can't remember actually what it was, but the look and the feel of the website really changed dramatically. And it was curious to me that conversation had never been had. But obviously somewhere, somebody was thinking, I don't like that font. I don't want that on our website. And as soon as they got the new person, the font had changed. Maybe it was the new web developer that had done it, or maybe it was somebody in the company. I don't really know, but it happened very quickly. Yeah. Okay. Fonts. So we'll come back to that on another episode. Colors and fonts, and look at that in a lot more detail.
Yeah, I think so. So we move on to what I was just talking about, actually. Logo.
Yep.
Keep me away from logos, please.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, this is honestly, If you just walk through the aisle of a supermarket and there are logos absolutely everywhere. In fact, just look around you where you're sitting right now. There'll be probably 50 logos within eyeshot. There's probably logos for all of the icons for the apps on your phone or on your computer, and then logos for books and publishing houses and computers and who knows what. And they all look like they're so easy to make. I mean, look at the Apple logo. It's so easy. But honestly, it doesn't matter how hard I try, I can never pull a logo off. It always looks inferior. My skill set is not logo creation. So for me, it was always a case of giving it to a graphic designer if the logo was needed. More often than not, though, for me, the logo was already in place.
You did the WP builds
I did.
Didn't you? Yeah.
But it's not particularly fabulous.
No, but it stands out, you see. Now you recognise it, so it's...
Yeah, but maybe over time it's become like bludgeoned into you. But it's basically a hexagon with a spanner in it, or a wrench, as they say in different parts of the world. But you're right. Yeah, maybe. But it's not terribly inspiring, I wouldn't say. But anyway, what about you? Do you feel this is an area of strength for you, or?
No, we're terrible at that kind of stuff. Just, I don't know. I had to do it on the recent one. I made the logo, and I said from the beginning, they asked, could I do that? And I said, it's not my strength. But as it's a new build and a new business, I wanted to have the discussion about how you might come up with the kind of branding and our plan and stuff. So I said, let's have a try and we'll do it. But we might need to get someone else to do that so we can go through that process.
Yeah, I think that's a perfectly reasonable statement, though. I can go to websites online and I can steal ideas from other logos that I've seen online, or go to those different websites where you can actually just create logos. I can do all of that, and I can change the colors and that sort of stuff. But if it wants to be unique and memorable and really different and done properly, my advice would be always get a pro in, because it's just chalk and cheese. Of course, you can sort of go like that semi-pro route, which is, well, I say semi-pro, maybe they are pros on the other end, but the sort of more affordable route of places like Fiverr to get this kind of stuff done as well.
I think that, in an ideal world, I would... well, actually, it depends, because we were saying with our lawyer, they probably don't need it would probably just be a font that would say their names, and it would be a serif font, and that would be done, and that's all that's needed for their branding. But if it was something like when we needed to create something like Starbucks have managed, where it's clearly handcrafted, then I definitely want to send that over to somebody else to do that. But if it was me, because I'm quite keen to have this agile approach, keep constantly improving the site, I want to be part of that marketing strategy. So I'd want to give them a brief about some of the basic ideas we had for their branding, to give it to somebody to come up with a logo. So that would be done for them to do it, where I wouldn't want the client to say go off to Fiverr, where they will basically show you a whole bunch of radically different designs, and the client's then left to pick one without any context or reference to the overall messaging. So so that's kind of, but again, that's the problem. If you don't send them off with a brief, we have the same issue we talked about before with the copywriters, because the people who do these brand logos are branding people, aren't they? And they will go through the whole branding and marketing strategy exercises for them, and it will cost a lot of money.
I guess the other thing as well is, there's a lot of work in it, not just in terms of creating something which is innovative and unique and requires actual design skills. That is to say, you can design something, but also you can use the technology like Photoshop or whatever, and really change things on a whim. If they want a certain different augmentation to something, you can do that easily. I just don't have those skills in Photoshop or any piece of design software. But also, I guess you've got to think about the different layouts that might be required. Like, do you want this to be just on a piece of paper? Is it just going to be top left of a website? In which case, is it just going to be letterbox? Or are you intending to use this on social networks? Or where is it going to go? And how might it look in different orientations and things like that? What kind of dimensions do you want?
Well, you know, that is exactly. It was a lot of work. I mean, I hadn't done a logo for anyone for a long time, so I did this one, and I cheated. I could take a vector that I found from somewhere else and just slightly change it with some text. But then I realized I had to do all the things that we're aware of, and I'm not even sure if the people who might do design of logos are aware of this, all these different formats, the fact that it needs to work on black and white, you need to be able to print it out in black and white. It needs to stand out against a black and white background for, you know, maybe you've got a dark footer and you want the logo to work in there against a light top, you know, the different dimensions, as you say, all of these things. It means that, and sometimes you're going to need it, so it's going to work in landscape, and sometimes portrait, so you're going to need to move things around. So there's a lot of work, isn't there, to put in together a kind of brand logo in all those different formats.
Yeah, I typically would have asked for basically a landscape version, a square version, which then would kind of be inherited in the sort of portrait version, and then I would ask for a completely dark version. So usually that would be something like black, and then a completely white version, both on a transparent background. So the black version of the landscape and the black version of the square, the white version of the landscape and the white version of the square. And then if there was an obvious color palette, I would probably ask for it to be in all of those separate 2 or 3 colors as well, just so that I had like 6 or 7 that I could deploy anywhere. So there is a lot going on,
Yeah, I think we'd be shipping this off wherever we can. The only reason I did the most recent one, and I can't remember last time I needed to create a logo, and I did it really because I just thought, well, let's start because of the fact that I wanted all of the things that I feel someone who's doing a brand logo should be asking. I wanted to know the answers to those questions. Myself.
Okay, that was number 6. So we're on to the final point, which is probably going to be really brief. Number 7. Which was apply your branding across your business.
For a term which they like, which I'm going to use more often because it sounds nice, for cohesive brand story. For a cohesive brand story.
For a cohesive brand story. So are we talking about putting that branding on all of the different places? So the copper plate on your outside wall and the letterhead of your paper and your business cards and all of that. Is that where all of this is finally getting sewn together?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think just when you're creating a brand, which is what we're trying to do, you just need to appreciate that it's going to have to be in multiple locations. Probably the stuff that we started off at the beginning, isn't it? In different situations, on and offline, and like you're saying, if you turn it into some brass plate.
You know, for this particular build, this Madame A build, this is so straightforward to do. You just need to know what the things are that the logo needs to go on. But imagine if you're a established business with hundreds, maybe thousands of employees. Imagine the headache that this presents. Right, everybody, you've got to bin all your business cards on the 1st of April when the new branding goes live. You've got to bin all the old leaflets. You've got to start using these new leaflets. All those letterheads need to go in the bin. You've got to change your email signature. There's another place. Change your email signatures. You've got to start using this one in all of the presentations that you've ever made. You've got to, every time you dig out a presentation to put somewhere, you've got to change the logo on. It's gigantic. It could be such a headache.
I know. I think you've got to get it right. I mean, 25 years ago when I joined the government office that I did, it just had a rebranding exercise. And the new logo cost them £1 million because of that process to get it kind of right, what they needed to communicate. And, but really, I would say for the next 10 years, I was still seeing the old logo on various documentation because there was so much of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some notable big rebrands that come to mind for me is when Coca-Cola spent an absolute ton, and I have no idea what the amount is, but it was a gigantic amount of money because they felt that they wanted to rebrand the Coke whole brand, and they ended up spending all this money, and all that they did was add a bit more of a white line underneath the already existing grey line. That was what they got from that. And then another one which comes to mind is the recent Google rebrand, where they took their old serif font, because obviously the brand is the word Google, and they replaced it with a sans serif font. And although really it basically stayed the same, Imagine the amount of places. Because I noticed, I occasionally get letters through the post from Google. All of that did change overnight. Everything was suddenly done correctly. Just huge amount of work.
Do you know what? There's a missing section, I feel, in this whole thing about branding, which you've just reminded me of with things like Apple and Google, and they've effectively kept their logos but kept it the same.
Yeah.
So a lot of them, they were reflecting the time. So when a lot of them went out there, the design was different, and then it went to flat design, and they all went flat. And I think when you're doing your branding, I think there is an element of keep it simple, stupid about it. You don't really want to add flourishes just because you need to. So with our lawyer, the name is probably fine in the font. It's going to communicate all they need to. What they're going to have, wings of justice or something. You don't really need all that. And I think that's the thing, because it makes it so much easier to change without affecting your branding so much. So it was pretty easy with both Apple and Google to just stick to their original shape and get rid of drop shadows or whatever gradients that they had on it. There was all that glass thing, wasn't there, going on?
Yeah, that's
Google?
right. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a missing section. I think when you're doing the branding, I think thinking about the long term, about how trends will change and how you keep it as simple as you can, so it's whatever you've created is more adaptable to change, is probably a good thing.
Yeah. Okay, well, there we go. So that was, I think we've reached the end there, haven't we?
We have.
We were on, so you've just listened to Series 2, Episode 4. We've been talking about creating a brand. What's Episode 5?
It's going to be about UX, and I have no idea where we're going, because it's such a huge topic. Yeah.
User experience. That'll be the next episode. That'll be out in a couple of weeks. That was enjoyable. Thanks, David.
Yeah, thanks a lot. All right, bye.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that. Always a pleasure to chat to my good friend David Walmsley. If there's anything that you agreed with, or possibly that you disagreed with, be sure to head over to the wpbuilds.com website, find episode number 275 and leave us a comment there. Alternatively, go to wpbuilds.com/Facebook, which is our Facebook group of over 3,000 very polite WordPressers, and leave us a comment there. Again, search for number 275. Don't forget that we've got a This Week in WordPress show. It's a live show each and every week. I'm joined typically by 3 very, very nice WordPressers, and we chat about the WordPress news from the previous week. That'll be live 2 p.m. UK time at wpbuilds.com/live. Alternatively, we'll see you here next Thursday for the next episode of the WP Builds podcast. All that remains for me to do now is fade in some cheesy music and say, stay safe. Bye-bye for now.